There's a question almost no man dares to answer honestly. How many times have you betrayed your own promise just to remain comfortable? Not the promise made to the world, the one made in silence when no one was watching. That early morning when you swore you would change your life, build wealth, discipline, respect, self-control, and yet you return to the same habits that are slowly destroying your potential. The brutal truth is that most men don't fail because they were born weak. They fail because they learn to love their own prison. They learn to call fear prudence. They learn to call procrastination planning. They learn to live anesthetized while watching other men build the life they know they could have lived. And here's what nobody talks about. The world doesn't respect potential. The world respects execution. It doesn't matter how many dreams you have, how many books you read, how many videos you watch, or how many motivational quotes you save on your phone. If your actions remain small, your life will remain small. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. The dangerous man is not the one who talks about discipline. It's the one who does what needs to be done even when tired, without applause and without validation. While most negotiate with themselves daily, a select few learn to destroy their own weakness in silence. And that's exactly why they become impossible to ignore. Perhaps this is unsettling to hear, but perhaps no one is coming to save you. Perhaps the life you want requires a version of you that doesn't yet exist. A colder version, more strategic, more disciplined, more silent, because comfort is killing more dreams than failure ever has. And throughout this video, you will understand why so many men remain trapped in mediocre lives, even though they are capable of so much more. You will understand the invisible psychology of self-sabotage, the real price of transformation, and how to build a mind that doesn't easily bend to fear, distraction, or the opinions of others. But there's an important detail. After deeply understanding this, you will probably never be able to look at your own complacency in the same way again. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There's a silent moment in a man's life when he makes a promise to himself, not in front of witnesses, not aloud, not with applause. It's that raw conversation in the dead of night when he realizes he was born for more, but continues to live below his potential. And ironically, the problem is almost never a lack of intelligence, nor is it bad luck, lack of opportunity, or absence of talent. The problem is usually much more uncomfortable to admit. He started negotiating with himself. He said he would train, but left it for Monday. He said he would study, but preferred to numb his mind by scrolling through short videos for hours. He said he would build wealth, but continued spending like someone who still lives to impress empty people. That's where a truth that Machiavelli would understand perfectly comes in. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. Because in the real world, no one transforms themselves intentionally. Transformation requires rupture. And almost every man wants the outcome of war without accepting the scars of combat. The most dangerous thing about all this is that over time, he learns to appear committed without truly being committed. And this is one of the most sophisticated traps of the human mind. The curious thing is that the brain always finds elegant justifications to protect its own mediocrity. It transforms procrastination into planning. It transforms fear into prudence. It transforms cowardice into waiting for the right moment. And meanwhile, the years pass at a brutal speed. A man looks back and realizes he wasted 5 years saying he was preparing. Machiavelli said, albeit implicitly, that virtù and fortuna walk hand in hand only for those who move. Luck favors those who enter the game. The person who remains still, waiting for absolute confidence, never discovers what they are capable of. Take the case of someone who wants to start a digital business. He spends months watching videos about marketing, branding, copywriting, investments, productivity, but never publishes anything, never sells anything, never tests anything. He has become an expert in preparation and completely bankrupt in execution. And that's where a very dangerous modern illusion is born. The feeling of progress without real progress. Reading without acting. Planning without executing. Dreaming without sacrificing. It seems like evolution, but it's just intellectual entertainment. And deep down, he knows it. He always knows. There's a stark difference between a man who wants to change his life and a man who has decided to change his life. The former constantly talks about goals. The latter reorganizes his entire environment around the mission. He understands that the end justifies the means when the objective is to escape a mediocre and emotionally dependent existence. Not in the sense of destroying others, but in the sense of abandoning old versions of himself without mercy, because all evolution requires a kind of psychological death. And that's frightening. It's frightening because it means leaving behind old habits, old friends, old pleasures, and even parts of one's identity that once provided comfort. A simple example. A man who decides to rebuild his financial life might need to stop frequenting places where every encounter revolves around consumption, drinking, and social validation. Perhaps you need to exchange hours of distraction for hours studying sales, investments, or communication. Books like Think and Grow Rich, The Prince, and the 48 Laws of Power can open important mental doors, but no reading will save someone who remains emotionally enslaved to comfort. And that's precisely where an uncomfortable question begins to emerge that almost no one wants to face. What if the real enemy isn't in the world, but in the silent comfort that he has learned to call peace? The problem with comfort is that it rarely seems like an enemy. It doesn't arrive breaking down doors, destroying everything, or announcing immediate failure. On the contrary, it arrives offering small, silent rewards. A soft sofa after a hard day. A well-deserved rest that becomes routine. A quick distraction that steals entire hours, and when man realizes it, he has built an elegant prison around his own life. That is the comfortable cage. It doesn't hurt enough to generate revolt, but it also never allows for real growth. Machiavelli understood something that many modern people ignore. Decisions based on real human nature matter more than beautiful speeches about potential. Because human beings naturally seek to conserve energy, avoid risk, and escape pain, the brain prefers known security to the promising unknown. And that is exactly why so many men remain in the same place for years, even hating their own reality. Not because they are incapable, but because they have learned to transform complacency into a lifestyle. Comfort began as rest and ended as identity, and almost no one realizes this early enough. There is a type of stagnation that is extremely dangerous because it looks like responsibility. The man says he is being prudent, but in reality, he is terrified of the possibility of failure. He keeps the same job he hates because it's safe. He remains surrounded by the same limited people because he's known them for years. He maintains destructive habits because it's not the ideal time to change. And so, without realizing it, he trades freedom for predictability. Machiavelli would call this a lack of virtù, the inability to act in the face of fortune when opportunity arises. Because constant adaptability is not just a strategic skill, it's psychological survival. Look at how many men dream of improving their bodies, but sabotage themselves every day. They say they will train, but spend nights sleeping late and feeding invisible vices. They want discipline, but organize their entire routine to remain weak. A simple and brutal example: exchanging an hour of empty entertainment for a daily walk already begins to change brain chemistry, mental clarity, and emotional perception. Reading 10 pages a day of something truly useful, like Atomic Habits or The Richest Man in Babylon, generates more transformation in a year than consuming motivational quotes for 5. But this requires a rare thing: voluntary discomfort. The truth that almost no one accepts is that excessive comfort destroys ambition. A man begins to tolerate lesser versions of himself. He accepts earning less than he could. He accepts superficial relationships. He accepts a routine without presence, without purpose, and without intensity. And worse, he learns to defend this mediocre life as if it were emotional maturity. That's where a silent trap arises. The more comfortable someone becomes in their own limitations, the more hostile they become towards anyone who represents change. That's why determined men often hear phrases like, "You're exaggerating," "You're always thinking about work," "You need to relax more." It's not always genuine concern. Often it's projection, because the discipline of the other directly confronts the complacency of the observer. Better to be feared than loved takes on an interesting meaning here. The respected man is not the one who constantly seeks emotional approval, but the one who conveys firmness through his own actions. Without long speeches, without needing to convince anyone, just silent consistency. And there is something even more dangerous than physical comfort: the psychological comfort of continuing to be exactly who you've always been. But the human mind creates sophisticated excuses to protect this prison, and few things are more destructive than that. The most dangerous excuses never sound like excuses. This is the detail that destroys the lives of many intelligent men. No one says directly, "I'm afraid to act." The brain creates much more sophisticated versions. "I'm not ready yet." "I need to study more." "I'll wait for the situation to improve." And so, one of the cruelest illusions of the human mind is born: the feeling that self-protection is wisdom. Machiavelli deeply understood how human nature works under pressure. He knew that most people create an appearance of virtue even for themselves. They feign prudence when deep down they are only avoiding discomfort, and this happens in all areas of life. A man says he wants to start a business but never begins because the market is tough. He wants to improve his physique, but his routine is hectic. He wants to learn English, invest, grow spiritually, make money, but there is always an emotionally convincing justification to remain exactly where he is. And the most frightening thing? Many of these excuses make sense. That's what makes them so lethal. Because the human mind doesn't need absurd lies to remain trapped. She just needs arguments reasonable enough to postpone the change once again. The brain was created to survive, not to transform you into your best version. This is a detail that completely changes how a man should view his own mind. When someone tries to evolve, the brain interprets it as a threat. That's why sudden laziness, procrastination, anxiety, doubt, and an urgent need for distraction arise precisely when the person should be acting. A man opens his laptop to study something important and suddenly feels the urge to check social media quickly. He decides to start going to the gym and suddenly becomes convinced that he should wait until Monday. He decides to save money and the mind begins to justify emotional purchases as deserved. This is not a coincidence. It's psychological self-preservation. The calculated use of force also needs to exist against oneself, because there is an inner side that will always try to negotiate mediocrity. A brutal example of this appears when someone tries to build financial discipline. In the first few days, everything seems easy. Then thoughts like, just today, I'll make up for it later. It doesn't make that much difference, arise. And that's how men destroy entire futures with small, seemingly harmless concessions. No empire falls all at once. First comes small, silent concessions. There is an even more sophisticated type of excuse: excessive intellectualization. Men consume content about productivity, power, mindset, business, philosophy, and personal development non-stop, but never put themselves in a real risk-taking situation. They know theories about wealth, but have never tried to sell anything. They know strategies about discipline, but have never sustained a habit for 90 days. They know concepts about masculinity, but remain emotionally dependent on the approval of others. It's like someone who reads hundreds of books about swimming without ever getting in the water. And deep down, this person begins to use knowledge as an escape mechanism. It seems like evolution on the outside, but it's just well-dressed fear. Machiavelli would probably see this as a fatal flaw of virtù and fortuna. Opportunity does not respect overly contemplative men. It favors those who move even imperfectly. A practical example: a man who wants to change his life could start with something simple and brutally efficient, waking up at the same time every day, training 3 times a week, and eliminating 1 destructive distraction per month. It doesn't seem revolutionary, but silent consistency creates new identities. But most people keep searching for magical methods because magical methods allow them to keep postponing the inevitable, acting despite fear. And when a man finally realizes this, he discovers something even more uncomfortable about true discipline. Most people romanticize discipline because they've never experienced the real thing. They imagine someone motivated, inspired, full of energy, waking up early with epic music playing in the background. But true discipline almost never looks beautiful. It's silent, repetitive, and often lonely. It's a man doing what needs to be done, even without any desire to do so. It's getting up when no one is watching, working while others are distracted, keeping going when enthusiasm died weeks ago. Machiavelli would understand this perfectly because all power building requires prolonged emotional resilience. The weak man acts on emotion. The dangerous man acts on identity. That's the brutal difference. Those who depend on motivation live, enslaved to their own moods. Those who build discipline based on identity create something much more solid. They don't train because they're excited. They train because that's the kind of man they've decided to be. They don't study when they feel inspired. They study because they understand that their own loyal armies begin within their own minds, and few wars are harder than overcoming their own daily self-sabotage. The dark side of discipline is that it requires constantly killing old versions of oneself, and that hurts more than almost any physical effort. Because abandoning destructive habits also means abandoning emotional parts of one's own identity. The man who has always seen himself as disorganized needs to stop repeating that mentally. The man who has always lived seeking approval needs to learn to endure rejection. The man emotionally dependent on comfort needs to build tolerance for voluntary discomfort. And the brain fights against this all the time. That's why so many people start strong and disappear after a few weeks. They were in love with the idea of transformation, not the brutal process necessary to achieve it. Machiavelli said, between the lines, that it is better to be feared than loved because respect is born from firmness, not emotional convenience. A disciplined man begins to cause discomfort in mediocre environments precisely because his presence exposes the lack of commitment of others. Look at someone who decides to radically change their body and mind. They reduce distractions, improve their diet, organize their schedule, control impulses, learn new skills. Quickly, criticisms disguised as jokes arise. Have you become a robot now? Thinking he's better than everyone else? It's not about him. It's about the mirror he's become. There's also a detail that almost no one talks about. Real discipline doesn't just create external results, it completely alters how a man sees himself. Every small promise kept strengthens inner authority. Every habit maintained increases silent self-esteem. And true self-esteem doesn't come from praise, it comes from personal evidence. A man begins to trust himself because he realizes he does what he said he would do. It seems simple, but it changes everything. A practical example, waking up at the same time every day for 60 days seems trivial. But neurologically, that teaches the brain a powerful message. I control my actions, not my impulses. The same applies to training, reading, deep work, or emotional control. Books like Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday help to understand this in a brutally practical way. Because in the end justifies the means when the goal is to build a man who doesn't compromise with himself every time life weighs him down. But prolonged discipline creates an inevitable consequence. The world begins to look at this man differently. And not everyone will like what they see. There's a stark difference between being liked and being respected, and many men spend years confusing the two. They try to please everyone, avoid conflict, respond immediately, always be available, always accessible, always understanding. At first, this seems like virtue. It seems like emotional maturity. It seems like kindness. But little by little, something strange happens. The world begins to treat them without any weight. Because true respect rarely arises from the need for approval. Machiavelli understood this uncomfortably lucidly when he said, "It is better to be feared than loved." Duns, not in the sense of spreading gratuitous cruelty, but in the sense of understanding that solid boundaries generate more respect than excessive sympathy. The man the world respects is not the loudest in the room. Often, he is the most controlled. He doesn't react emotionally to every provocation. He doesn't constantly explain himself. He doesn't beg for understanding. His posture communicates something silent. I know who I am. And this creates a presence that few people can ignore. Because genuine self-control transmits power in an almost instinctive way to the human mind. The problem is that many men have been conditioned to believe that firmness is arrogance. So they live trying to soften their own presence so as not to bother anyone. They apologize for existing. They laugh when they want to say no. They accept disrespect to avoid tension. And little by little, they teach the whole world to overstep their boundaries. Machiavelli spoke about the appearance of virtue precisely because he understood that society often rewards social masks while destroying silent authenticity. The respected man understands something that few accept. Not all rejection should be avoided. Sometimes, losing access to certain people is exactly the price of one's own evolution. Look at a man who begins to value his own time. He stops immediately responding to every message. He learns to say no. He refuses invitations that drain energy. He spends less time trying to convince others of his plans. Quickly, some people will call him cold, distant, or different. But there is almost always a hidden meaning in this. He has ceased to be easily manipulated, and people accustomed to unlimited access rarely cope well when they encounter real limits. The calculated use of force also appears here, not through emotional aggression, but through strategic restraint. There is something extremely powerful in a man who doesn't need to prove anything all the time. He enters environments without a desperate need for validation. He doesn't talk too much to seem intelligent. He doesn't show off to seem important. He doesn't turn every achievement into a public spectacle. Silence, posture, and consistency begin to speak for him. A clear example of this appears in the professional environment. The insecure man constantly tries to impress. The respected man delivers results. While one seeks attention, the other builds silent authority. And curiously, it is the latter who tends to grow faster. Because decisions based on real human nature show that people trust more in those who convey emotional stability than in those who seek excessive approval. This also applies to relationships, friendships, and business. An emotionally stable man creates a sense of psychological security. And security is rare in a world where almost everyone lives reacting impulsively to everything. Books like The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene help to see these dynamics with brutal clarity. But there is an even more powerful skill than knowing how to impose presence, knowing how to strategically disappear when necessary. And few men understand the psychological power of silence before they lose everything by talking too much. Few men understand the value of silence before suffering the consequences of talking too much. There is an almost compulsive modern need to share everything: plans, goals, feelings, achievements, pains, projects, and even fragile strategic moves. People announce what they are going to do even before building the necessary capacity to sustain it. And without realizing it, they transform execution energy into premature social validation. Machiavelli observed human nature coldly and realistically. Whoever reveals everything loses psychological advantage. Because the world doesn't always root for someone's silent growth. Often, while a man talks about his plans, other people begin to project fear, envy, sarcasm, or doubt onto him. And even if he doesn't consciously realize it, this affects his mental energy. The strategic man learns early on that silence is not the absence of strength, it is the storage of strength. He understands that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, means acting with emotional intelligence, not with emotional impulsiveness. Not every goal needs to be announced. Not every pain needs to become a spectacle. Not every battle needs witnesses. Some transformations grow better in the dark. There's an extremely powerful psychological detail in the man who speaks little and observes much. He becomes unpredictable, and excessive predictability reduces impact. The man who exposes every thought, every emotion, and every next step loses strategic depth. The silent man, on the other hand, creates presence, because while everyone desperately tries to be noticed, he learns to use invisibility as an advantage. Look at someone building a serious business. The emotionally immature man announces the idea on the first day, changes his profile picture, posts quotes about success, and starts acting like a millionaire even before the first sale. The strategic man works quietly. He learns, he makes mistakes, he adjusts, he grows. And when the world realizes it, he has already built something real. That is virtue and fortune in motion. Luck seems to follow those who move in silence because energy is no longer wasted on social performance. The calculated use of force also appears here, not reacting immediately, not responding to every provocation, not justifying every choice. In many cases, the emotional reaction is exactly what the other person wants. And the man who masters silence masters something very rare today: self-control. The most interesting thing is that strategic silence doesn't mean cold emotional isolation. It means intelligent selectivity. A man learns that not everyone deserves unrestricted access to his deepest thoughts. Not every friendship supports growth. Not every environment deserves complete transparency. And this completely changes how he positions himself in the world. He begins to understand that the appearance of virtue is often just social theater to manipulate public perception. So he stops seeking collective approval and starts protecting his inner construct. A simple and extremely powerful example, drastically reducing the need to explain personal decisions. When a man decides to train seriously, study more, earn money, or change habits, he doesn't need to convince anyone of it. Consistent results convince much more than emotional discourse. Books like The Art of War repeatedly show how strategic invisibility generates a competitive advantage in any field of life. Because emotionally impulsive men reveal everything ahead of time. But there comes a point when silence alone is no longer enough. There comes a time when certain environments, people, and old versions of oneself need to be eliminated without hesitation. And this is perhaps one of the most difficult decisions of all. There's an inevitable moment in the transformation process when a man realizes something uncomfortable. Some people can only love him while he remains small. As long as he remains accessible, predictable, emotionally available, and stuck in the same old patterns, everything seems fine. But as soon as he starts to change seriously, the entire environment reacts. And this reaction rarely comes directly. It appears in small ironies, criticisms disguised as concern, subtle jokes, or comments that try to weaken his conviction. Machiavelli understood this deeply when he spoke about decisions based on real human nature. Because human beings tend to resist change in others when it confronts their own complacency. The man who decides to grow becomes an uncomfortable mirror for those who remain stagnant. And that's where many fail. They try to evolve without abandoning what continually pulls them back. They want to build discipline while maintaining the same habits. They want to get rich surrounded by people who ridicule ambition. They want mental clarity while consuming emotionally chaotic environments. But no empire is built by preserving everything that weakens its structure. At some point, bridges need to be burned. The problem is that severing certain connections requires an emotional detachment that few people have the courage to develop. Because not all sabotage comes from declared enemies. Sometimes it comes from old friends, from comfortable relationships, from social circles based solely on distraction, complaining, and collective stagnation. And this emotionally confuses the man who is changing. He thinks, but these people have always been with me. Yes. But the real question is, were they there to propel his evolution or to keep him emotionally accessible and predictable? The calculated use of force appears precisely here. Not every rupture needs a scandal. Often, it's enough to reduce access, to decrease presence, to become unavailable to environments that drain mental energy. A brutally practical example. A man who wants to rebuild his life will hardly be able to do so by spending 5 nights a week surrounded by people whose only goal is to escape their own reality through excesses, gossip, or constant distractions. Environment silently shapes identity. Books like Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins and Mindset by Carol Dweck repeatedly show how beliefs and social contexts shape behavior. And it's frightening to realize how many men remain emotionally attached to old versions of themselves just to avoid temporary loneliness. But there's an even harder truth. Sometimes the most toxic environment isn't external. It's the old identity that a person continues to silently nurture. The lazy version, the insecure version, the version that needed everyone's approval, the version that used humor to hide emotional emptiness. Burning bridges also means stopping mentally revisiting characters that should have already died within him. Machiavelli spoke of constant adaptability because he understood that survival requires continuous reinvention. The strong man doesn't idolize who he was. He respects the journey, but doesn't remain trapped in it. Consider someone who spent years being seen as the funny one, the irresponsible one, the lost one, the one who never finishes anything. When he starts acting differently, people try to push him back into his old role, because social identities create collective comfort, and few can tolerate it when someone breaks the expected persona. It's at this point that a person needs to develop a kind of emotional surgical precision, eliminating everything that weakens his mission, even if part of him is still attached to it, because every serious transformation exacts a high psychological price. And the higher he climbs, the more he realizes that there is a specific kind of loneliness waiting for him. Most men try to change their lives without realizing that the true battlefield has never been in the external world. It's in the mind. Because strategy, money, knowledge or opportunity are useless if the mind remains vulnerable to impulses, distractions and emotional manipulation. Machiavelli would understand this almost surgically. A man incapable of governing himself will never hold real power. And the modern problem is that almost everyone lives mentally hijacked. They react to notifications as conditioned reflexes. Their moods change based on others' opinions. They lose focus due to cheap stimuli. They give their attention, the most valuable resource of the current era, to anything that makes enough noise. The mentally weak man lives in a constant state of reaction. The dangerous man, on the other hand, develops inner sovereignty. He chooses what deserves his energy. He chooses what deserves his emotion. He even chooses which thoughts deserve to remain. This is politics guided by reality, not by ideals, applied to one's own mind. Because in the real world, those who don't control their own attention end up living the objectives of others without realizing it. There's a brutal detail about mental strength. It's not born in grand moments. It's born from small, invisible decisions repeated daily. A man builds a resilient mind when he learns to endure discomfort without immediately running away from it. When he can be alone without needing to numb his own consciousness with excessive stimulation. When he can listen to criticism without emotionally collapsing. When he learns to endure silence without needing to fill every second with distraction. A simple and extremely powerful example, spending 30 minutes a day completely away from your cell phone, just thinking, writing, or organizing ideas. It seems banal, but today this is almost a revolutionary act. Because the modern mind has been trained to depend on constant dopamine, quick videos, notifications, instant answers, immediate validation, and a man addicted to stimulation loses psychological depth. Machiavelli spoke of virtù and fortuna because he understood that inner preparation precedes external opportunity. A man can receive the chance of a lifetime and destroy it through emotional impulsiveness. He can gain money and lose everything due to a lack of mental control. He can gain respect and ruin his own reputation through an uncontrolled ego. Without a strong mind, any external achievement becomes unstable. The most dangerous thing is that the world rewards distraction, because distraction creates dependence. A man who is too focused becomes difficult to manipulate. He buys less on impulse. He seeks less approval. He tolerates less mediocrity. He asks uncomfortable questions, and this threatens entire systems based on fragmented attention. That's why the strategic man learns early on to protect his own mind as sacred territory. He carefully selects what he consumes. He observes which content strengthens clarity and which only stimulates anxiety. Books like Essentialism by Greg McKeown and Deep Work by Cal Newport help build this mental architecture in an extremely practical way. Because having your own loyal armies also means disciplined thoughts, controlled emotions, and focused direction. An untouchable man is not someone without pain. He is someone who does not surrender control of his own mind to any external circumstance. But building this psychological fortress comes at a high price. The more conscious he becomes, the more he realizes that true evolution requires real losses. And almost no one speaks honestly about the emotional cost of becoming who they were born to be. Almost every man desires transformation until he discovers its true price. Because changing one's life seems inspiring while it's still just an idea. The problem begins when transformation ceases to be a concept and starts demanding concrete sacrifice. That's when many back down. Machiavelli understood something brutal about power and evolution. No significant construction happens without losses. The man who grows inevitably abandons old versions of himself, and few pains are as silent as realizing that you no longer belong in the places where you once felt comfortable. Evolution creates distance, emotional, mental, and even social distance. The man begins to realize that certain conversations have lost their meaning. Certain environments drain energy. Certain relationships only survived while he remained small. And this generates a strange loneliness. It's not exactly sadness. It's more like crossing a bridge where the old life is left behind, but the new identity hasn't yet fully consolidated. The problem is that many people interpret this emptiness as a sign of error, when in fact it is usually a sign of transition. Every psychological reinvention requires a period of internal disorientation. There's an extremely uncomfortable aspect of growing up that almost no one shows on social media: the mourning for one's old identity. A person begins to symbolically die to the habits, desires, and emotional needs that once defined who they were. And this is frightening, because identity creates a sense of psychological security. Even a limited version of oneself still feels familiar. That's why so many people revert to old patterns after small evolutions, not because they can't grow, but because the brain prefers known suffering to unknown uncertainty. Machiavelli spoke of constant adaptability because he understood that survival requires the ability to quickly abandon what no longer serves a purpose. A clear example of this appears when someone finally starts earning money, developing discipline, or building real self-control. People who once seemed close begin to treat them with strangeness. Some silently distance themselves. Others try to diminish their achievements through irony or subtle comments. And it hurts to realize this. It hurts because the person understands that not every bond was as deep as they imagined. Some relationships only existed as long as they remained emotionally accessible, predictable, and easy to control. The calculated use of force also requires courage to endure these losses without running back to old emotional prisons. The most interesting thing is that the cost of becoming someone isn't just external. There's also a brutal internal battle happening at the same time. Because as a man grows, he begins to see more clearly the wasted time, the ignored opportunities, and the versions of himself that lived below his potential. And this generates anger, sometimes sadness, sometimes silent guilt. But strong men learn something important. Regret is only useful when it becomes strategic fuel, not when it becomes eternal self-punishment. The end justifies the means takes on a profound meaning here. Abandoning comfort, cutting out distractions, enduring temporary solitude, and destroying old versions of oneself ceases to seem excessive when one understands the magnitude of the life one can build. Books like The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday show exactly that. Difficulty is not an interruption of the journey. Often, it is the journey itself. And as a man continues to advance, something curious begins to happen. He realizes that he no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. External validation loses its power. The noise of the world loses its influence. Because slowly, the only thing that truly matters begins to emerge: coherence between the promise he made to himself and the man he is finally becoming. And when that happens, destiny ceases to seem like chance. Ultimately, the greatest tragedy is not failing the world. It's failing one's own silent promise, because there's a kind of pain that no amount of money can numb. Looking at yourself and realizing you've lived below your potential out of fear, comfort, or distraction. Machiavelli understood that destiny doesn't belong to the most dreamy, but to the most prepared. Virtue and fortuna walk hand in hand only when a person decides to act even without absolute guarantees. And this is where almost everyone gets lost. They wait to feel complete confidence before acting. They wait for fear, doubt, and insecurity to disappear. But the person who truly transforms learns something brutal. Courage never comes before action. It is born during action. Each small commitment fulfilled strengthens a new identity. Each promise kept builds inner authority, and little by little the person stops seeing themselves as someone trying to change their life, because they have finally become someone who lives differently. Not perfect, not invincible, just consistent. And consistency is a silent form of power that few manage to develop in the modern world. The man who keeps his promise to himself understands that discipline is not a heroic event. It's an almost invisible sequence of choices repeated daily. He learns that success rarely explodes all at once. It usually accumulates silently until it seems inevitable. While others seek emotional shortcuts, he builds foundations. While others seek motivation, he creates structure, and this completely changes his presence in the world. Because the disciplined man transmits something rare, emotional stability. He doesn't panic in the face of difficulty. He doesn't abandon goals at the first sign of discomfort. He doesn't change direction every week due to external influence. A policy guided by reality, not ideals, comes to define his entire life. He understands that the world respects consistency much more than potential. A simple example of this appears in any field. The man who trains silently for 2 years inevitably surpasses the talented but inconsistent man. The man who invests small amounts monthly for years builds wealth, while others only dream of getting rich quick. The man who reads, learns, and executes continuously creates an inevitable advantage over time. Books like The Prince, Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Finance, and David Goggins's Can't Hurt Me repeatedly demonstrate the same truth. Strong men are built in the invisible before they are recognized in the visible. But perhaps the greatest change happens internally. Because at some point, a man realizes that he no longer lives trying to impress others. He doesn't need to announce evolution. He doesn't need to convince anyone of his plans. He doesn't need to turn discipline into a public spectacle. His life begins to speak for itself, and this creates a strange, almost dangerous peace, the peace of someone who has finally emerged from the war against himself. Of course, there will still be difficulties, losses, moments of doubt and loneliness. The strong man doesn't eliminate suffering. He learns to carry suffering without breaking his own direction. Better to be feared than loved takes on a new meaning here. Not fear based on aggression, but the inevitable respect that arises when someone realizes that this man no longer negotiates with his own weakness. The calculated use of force now happens within the mind, every day, in silence. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson of all. No one wakes up transformed. The man the world admires was built on thousands of invisible decisions that no one saw. While others complained, he continued. While others doubted, he continued. While others sought sophisticated excuses, he continued. And that's exactly why, one day, fate finally starts to feel deserved. Now the question is no longer whether you have potential. The question is, how much longer will you continue negotiating with your own weakness? Because after all this, you've realized that the greatest enemy was never a lack of opportunity, bad luck, or absence of talent. It was comfort. It was the need for approval. It was the old version of yourself trying to survive within your mind every day. And perhaps the hardest truth to accept is this: no one will come and build your discipline for you. No one will come and save your life while you continue to postpone decisions you already know you need to make. Machiavelli understood that strong men are not born ready-made. They are shaped by pressure, discomfort, and the ability to act while others hesitate. It's better to be feared than loved, because the respected man is the one who masters himself. And deep down, you already know exactly which habits are silently destroying your life. You already know which distractions are stealing your years. You already know which people drain your energy. You already know which excuses your mind repeats daily to avoid real transformation. The brutal question is, for how long? Because in 5 years, there will only be 2 types of men. The first will be the one who continues watching videos about change while remaining trapped in the same emotional patterns. The second will be the one who decides to act even when imperfect, tired, and without guarantees. And the difference between them will not be intelligence. It will be the courage to endure discomfort without running back to their own psychological prison. The end justifies the means when the goal is to build someone who finally honors their own word. So now I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. What part of your life do you know you need to destroy in order to finally evolve? What habit is keeping you small? What fear still controls your decisions? And most importantly, who would you have become if you had started a year ago? If this video resonated with you, write in the comments. I want to know what promise you're tired of breaking to yourself. And if you want to continue learning about discipline, psychological power, strategy, self-control, and masculine transformation based on real human nature, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because from here on out, either you continue negotiating with your own weakness, or you finally become the man no one believed you could be.